Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, CIBC Wood Gundy's Ross Clark comments on the rapid fall of the Canadian dollar. Trends Journal publisher Gerald Celente trumpets the likely winner of the U.S. presidential race and tells us where to invest in troubled times. We'll talk to Ross Clark right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Clark, investment advisor at CIBC Wood Gundy in Vancouver. Welcome back to This Week in Money, Ross.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
The Canuck buck took a kicking, or did it?
The Canuck buck, we had 80 cents a week and a half ago, and, it gave up 3 cents very quickly. Tried to bounce back this week with the oil market. Oil actually got up to $47. That was a new high for the move. And the CRB index also had an excellent move back to test the highs. But the commodity currencies, the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, just didn't have much power behind them. The dollar retraced about just over 40% of its losses into the middle of this week and then started to roll over again. And interestingly, that's pretty much the reciprocal of what happened back in January, February, when both oil and the dollar bottomed together in January. And then as oil retested its low, the Canadian dollar was a few cents higher, showing good bullish divergence at that point. So, here we are, weakness in the currency after 15 weeks of fabulous movement to the upside. So at this point, we'll be looking for still the 74 to 73 cent level as a reasonable downside target, retracing about half of the move off the bottom.
Were the Fort McMurray fires a factor in that at all?
Clearly, headline item definitely having, an impact from a psychological point of view, but they're going to be gearing up pretty quickly here on getting the pipelines up and running again. I think that this was not as much of a factor as people would like to believe. Well,
I heard Enbridge say that it cut oil production by 900,000 barrels a day, about a third of Canadian production. But on the bright side, the production facilities themselves were not hit by the fire. They just have to wait for the people to be able to come back.
Oh, that's right. And, they for all that they lost 2,400 buildings, that was 10% of what was there, and clearly the infrastructure they're working on pretty quickly here to try and bring that back up to speed. And elsewhere in the world we have issues. They had some pipeline issues in Nigeria, and so they lost some production there. But on the other side of the equation, in the Middle East, you're looking at Iraq having now 3.6 billion barrels a day that they're pushing out. So they're right back up to full production. And if anything, the oil market, if we try and judge it day by day, week by week on the given supply demand numbers, it's like trying to second guess why the stock market is up or down for any given day as well.
Well, there's still all those super tankers just doing circles out on the ocean with all that surplus oil, waiting for a place to put it.
Yeah. And at some point, the market will correct. At this point, we're still thinking something into the probably the high 30s is the first level to be looking at there.
How did the equity markets do during the week?
Well, this, we always take a look at the seasonality aspect of it, and when you get into the April, you're tending to look at a seasonal high. By the time you get to the middle of May, the best selling opportunities have usually come and gone. And the second half of May carrying us into June is where the next good buying opportunities will generally come into play. And that That doesn't matter whether it's the average year, whether it's a normal election year, or in the case of a second-term president. The latter part of May, taking you into June, is where you want to find that next good opportunity to pick up some bargains. And from there, that seasonal low, in most instances, you get a pretty nice rally into July. So look at that as a trading opportunity.
How are precious metals doing?
Well, this was a risk-off type of day today, which meant that U.S. dollar was strong, that the U.S. Treasury bond market was strong, and gold market was pretty good. Considering that we had strength in the dollar, gold closed off the week at $1,272, up about $5 or $6 on the day. And we were talking last week in the letters that we put out about this megaphone pattern that gold has been in since March, where you're getting progressively a series of higher highs but also lower lows in this expanding pattern. And we've got maybe a dozen of these examples going back over the decades. And when you break out through to a new high, as we did above 1273 here a week and a half ago, and made that push to 1300, you don't want to see that style of pattern come back and overlap the breakout by more than 1%. So that would be down to 1260. And we also like to see it hold at the 20-day moving average, which also this week was at about 1261. So what we have had is the classic sort of maximum allowable pullback on this breakout. And if the megaphone pattern is to be viable at this point, you want to see a pretty good run to the upside. If it does break through the 1260, then you would look for a test to the lower end of this pattern. So that'll put us into maybe the 1210 area, maybe $50 risk below that 1260 level.
Ross, how can somebody contact you if they wanted to get more information?
Well, they can always send me an email at ross.clark@cibc.ca.
My guest has been Ross Clark, investment advisor at CIBC Wood Gundy, Vancouver. Coming up next, Gerald Celente on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
My guest is Gerald Celente, publisher of the Trends Journal and the guy in charge of the Trends Research Institute. Welcome back to This Week in Money, Gerald.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Jim.
Can you just give us a little thumbnail sketch of what the Trends Journal does?
Oh, we give you history before it happens. So, for example, just today, the Spring Trends Journal's going out, and among the things that you know I've been talking about on your show for quite some time are the issues going on with gold. And you know our forecasts. So when you read the Trends Journal and you know our forecasts, we're ahead of the news and on top of the trends. So just yesterday, for example, J.P. Morgan Private Bank announced that they expect gold to hit $1,400 an ounce, and they're recommending their clients position for a new and very long bull market for gold. Well, they said that yesterday, but we've been saying that now for months. So what we do with the Trends Journal is we get past the spin, and we have no special agendas. We're political atheists. We look at things for the way they are and not the way we want them to be. But when you turn on the media, most of the people that you see are paid pundits. They're on the staff of the networks. So, for example, if there's a terror strike and they have a terror expert, that person, they'll bring him in as a terror expert, but they're on the staff. They're getting paid. So they get paid to say what that network likes to hear, and that fits their agenda, where the Trends Journal, as I said, we're political atheists. We look at things for the way they are and not the way we want them to be.
Well, I know for a fact that many of the people I interview over the week for Business News have been banned from business news networks in the U.S. because their opinions don't match the idea that the TV station is always right.
Exactly. And again, they're paid. They're paid consultants, the ones that you see. They're on the payroll. So when you're on the payroll, you have to watch you don't step over the line. So that's why you keep hearing the same things over and over again. And what you hear is very different than what is often. And so that's why we take a very different view of the events of the world. We just give our analysis, and our forecasts provide suggestions. We don't give financial advice on what to do and the dangers that lie ahead and the opportunities to seize. But again, when you turn into most of the media, it's a one-sided story.
Of course, we know politics greatly affects financial markets. What about the Donald Trump-Hillary Clinton battle?
Well, actually, I mentioned to you we have a new forecast in our Trends Journal, and we had been forecasting since last April. This is 2 months before Donald Trump got into the election, that it was going to be Hillary Clinton. And with the point we pointed out back then, remember this is 2 months before Trump announces, is that on women's issues, the Republican candidates are going to lose, such as, women's rights, abortion, on and on. And they're on the other side of the page. And then when you look at the raw numbers, about 10 million more women vote than men. And again, you look at the raw numbers, and Obama running against Romney and got 12% more of the women vote. So with now Trump in there and having such a negative women rating, but 73% negative, we had forecast initially, again, after Trump got in as well, that it would be Hillary Clinton. Now we're changing that forecast. And it looks like a Trump White House at this time. And there are a lot of wild cards, so nobody could predict it. And there's no more wild a card than Donald Trump. But going back to the women issue, why it won't make the difference in the election this time is that, yes, Hillary Clinton may get more of the women votes, but Trump is very smart in what he's doing by attacking her by, quote, playing the women's card early on before they even face off against each other. So what he's done is neutralized that issue, brought it out to the forefront, and the sides have been taken on it already. And then, of course, him calling Bill Clinton an enabler, and so really bashing into Hillary's playing the woman's card, and again, him using that term. So what does it come down to? It comes down to what used to be the back office statement that permeated the 1992 election when Bill Clinton ran against Ross Perot and George Herbert Walker Bush. And the Clinton backroom slogan that they never lost sight of was, "It's the economy, stupid." And that's what it is today. According to the latest polls, 9 out of 10 people are most concerned about the state of their economic welfare. And on that number, that's where Trump trumps Clinton. Because when you hear Trump going around the country trumpeting out that we're going to put a 35% tax on China, this and that, and how these trade agreements stink, well, who's associated with the trade agreements? That's Bill Clinton, NAFTA. And Hillary Clinton supporting the Trans-Pacific Partnership, calling it golden at one time. Now, of course, she's backtracked. But that's how he's going to beat her. He's going to out-Clinton the Clintons, essentially. It's the economy, stupid. But again, there are the wild cards, and nobody, that's why no one could predict the future. And again, there is no wilder card than Donald Trump. And what's also important, there's never been an election in my lifetime or in modern American history where there's been violence coming from both sides of the aisles. In terms of when Trump went to speak in Chicago a few months ago, he was unable to. The massive protests. When he was in California recently, massive protest fights, anti-Trump supporters, Hillary Clinton supporters against Trump supporters. And they were mostly, according to the reports, in California, Hispanic. And then you'd think about Trump wanting to put up that wall, as he says. So you can see what's going on. And as an American, I'm very saddened that there's this kind of violence and acrimony in a presidential race. But that's what it's become, and that's what it is. And it's going to get worse rather than get better as it continues, considering who the candidates are.
Could you see riots at the Republican convention similar to the riots at the Democratic convention in Chicago back in the 60s?
No. For the reason being is that I believe they're going to quell them before they happen. If they're not stopped, they will happen. But from all the reports that we're getting, the militarization around the convention centers is going to be quite intense. So it's going to, they may flare up in other places, but not as it happened in Chicago back in 68. It'll be very different. It'll be far away from it. But again, you know, it's hard to tell, but with the precautions being made now, I don't think we'll see that scene. But again, that scene could happen in another city to reflect what's going on there. So it's hard to tell.
Well, Trump appeared in Lyndon, Washington, just across the border from Vancouver, very recently, and the people who went from here down there to see him said they couldn't believe the police and military presence. They'd never seen soldiers before at a political function.
Well, America's become militarized, and we've been writing about that in the Trends Journal for, you know, several years now, and it's become a police state. And again, the fish rots from the head down. How many presidents have taken America to war? How many times you see a sporting event and they're saluting the troops? Militarization has become the way of the American life. And so after a while, you become accustomed to it. You get on a train, get on a plane. You know, it's a militarized zone. And so you're going to see more and more of it. Matter of fact, they did something under Obama, the National Defense Authorization Act in New Year's Eve 2011. They repealed the Posse Comitatus Act that was put in place during the Civil War. And they repealed it, and it prohibits that the Posse Comitatus Act prohibited the military from doing police duties on American soil. Obama repealed that. So now you're seeing it's become very much by the equipment, by the vehicles, by the armaments, by the dress. It's a police state in the truest sense of the word.
A lot of people have drawn similarities between Trump and, of course, Nazi Germany. Is that real?
Well, in some way, you know, our campaign slogan is for 2016, it's Trump or Clinton, Hitler or Hitlery. And while Trump yells out these comments, look at the blood on Hillary Clinton's hands and look at the glee in which she accepts it. Now, somebody listening would say, Mr. Celente, that's a pretty nasty statement you just made. And I'm saying, all I'm saying is go look at the facts. Among them, go to YouTube, put in the name Hillary Clinton, CBS News, and Gaddafi. And she's asked on CBS News how she felt when they found out Gaddafi was killed. And she straightens herself up, puts a big smile on her face, and said, we came, we saw, he died. I'm not making that up. So when I say blood on her hands in Hillary, or Hitlery, she, Samantha Powers and Susan Rice were behind pushing Obama to overthrow Gaddafi that's now devastated that country. Listen to Hillary Clinton, Assad has to go. Hillary Clinton supported virtually every war this country's fought, beginning with her husband's. With the people forget that Saddam Hussein, Bill Clinton was bombing Baghdad, virtually Baghdad and Iraq. They had no-fly zones throughout his presidency. Put sanctions on the Iraqis. Over 500,000 Iraqi children under the age of 5 died, according to the United Nations, under Bill Clinton. The Kosovo War, Bill Clinton. So it's Hitlery or Hitler, and that's what America's degraded to. And by the way, you look at the polls. Never in modern history have two candidates run for office with such high negative ratings between both of them. Never.
We're speaking with Gerald Celente, publisher of the Trends Journal. Gerald, taking a look at the world economy, what kind of shape is it in right now?
Well, you look at once again, you look at the cover of our new Trends Journal, and it really says it all. It's a wonderful illustration by Anthony Freda, who's this world-renowned artist and illustrator, and it reads, "Central bankers build economic time bomb." And he has a great illustration there of sticks of dynamite around a time clock and ready to go off. We've never seen anything like this in the history of the world, where central bankers have fueled this big Ponzi scheme. And it's not only the United States, as I said, central bankers. Look what China's doing. And China is one of those numbers on this time clock. You're seeing their debt level go from $500 billion 20 years ago, $500 billion 20 years ago, to over $30 trillion today. And then pick up the news. 2 days ago they announced more stimulus, but they don't call it that. They're going to prop up failing or industries that have too much supply and not enough demand, so that they keep unemployment down. And when you look at unemployment, that's a huge issue in China. China's greatest threat is not the United States' pivot to Asia. It's a rebellion among the people if they're out of work. And you've seen riots going on. They don't report them like they used to. Last year was some estimated 30,000 labor-related protests. 30,000. So that's their major concern. So they keep dumping money into a failing system. Because then when you look at the numbers, exports continue to drop, imports in China continue to drop, and China's the greatest importer of natural resources, some 40 to 50% of them, depending on the category, in the world. So if China isn't buying, then Brazil, Canada, Australia, Chile, Congo, Nigeria, Algeria, resource-rich nations, Venezuela, they're not exporting. So you're looking at a global crisis, an economic time bomb, and the fuse again was lit by the central bankers. Because rather than let it take its natural course following the panic of '08, they juiced the markets artificially, and now that artificial juice, doesn't work. And it's just like taking an allotropic drug for a chronic degenerative disease. It treats the symptoms, but it doesn't cure the disease. And that's what quantitative easing, negative and zero interest rate policy has done. It's just kept the Ponzi patient alive. It hasn't cured it.
Somebody said if the central bankers all retired, quit, and we just went back to a treasury system, things would be so much better off.
I agree. Yeah, again, there's no such thing in capitalism as what's going on now. There's no such thing in capitalism as too big to fail. There's no such thing in capitalism as a group of central bankers running the entire world. And this is unheard of. But it's going on in front of everybody's eyes. And they applaud, salute, and bow down to them. And they pay them very high salaries and let them destroy the world as they keep their beneficiaries happy. And who are the beneficiaries? Did you see the new study that just came out last week about all the billions of dollars that just a handful of hedge fund operators made? Look at the facts. In the United States, 95% of the wealth gains since the Panic of '08 have gone to the 1%. Look at the facts. The equity markets boomed since quantitative easing and zero interest rate policy because of stock buybacks in the United States to the tune of over $60 billion a month and mergers and acquisition activity. It's slowing down this year because they're running out of juice. But the low interest rates and quantitative easing have made that possible. In the meantime, it's a war against savers because we, the little people, have no place to put our money other than gamble in the markets. And that's why we're saying that the panic of 2016 is underway. Again, look at gold prices. They're up over 20% since the start of the new year. And it's one piece of information after another showing very strong growth demand for gold. As a matter of fact, the World Gold Council just came out and they said that gold demand surged 21%. Remember, the price of gold is up over 20%, but demand also surged 21% in the first quarter of this year. And that's the fastest pace on record. What gold is doing, it's reflecting the safe haven commodity that it is in a world of not only economic turmoil, but geopolitical strife.
The desire for gold has resulted in somewhere in China, they are now minting gold coins that are fake. They're tungsten slugs covered with a thin gold cover. So they weigh about the same as a real gold coin, and using laser technology, they'll look like a real Canadian maple leaf or U.S. eagle. A lot of people have been already stung by this scam because of that gold fever.
Oh, yeah. And again, you're always going to see it. President Obama just spoke recently at Howard University last Saturday. And in his talk, he said something that I found very disturbing. He told the students, I'm going to read you the quote. And you're talking about thievery going on now and basically immorality of people ripping other people off and not caring about the consequences as long as they get what they want. Here's what President Obama said. Quote, he's talking to the students. If you think that the only way forward is to be as uncompromising as possible, you will feel good about yourself. Now he's talking about the protests that these young people are becoming more and more involved in. You will enjoy a certain moral purity, but you're not going to get what you want, the president said. So what he just said was, you will enjoy a certain moral purity, but give that moral purity up. Because if you keep the moral purity, you won't get what you want. What a disgraceful statement for somebody to make. President of the United States saying, don't stick by your morality, sell out. Because after all, that's what I've done. Morals don't count for me. When I promised you all these things that I said I was going to do as candidate Obama and didn't deliver on them, well, that's what sociopaths do. And now he's telling these students to do the same thing. And even as ignorant as that statement is, as disgusting, he goes on to say how the great achievements that have been made, and he said, Shonda Rhimes owns Thursday night, and Beyonce runs the world. Could you imagine Eisenhower making such a stupid statement? And again, it's not only Obama, it's the Bushes, it's the Clintons, it's the decline of America. And when he talks about not having a moral purity, and going back to what you were saying about, people will keep robbing and stealing, the fish rots from the head down.
Elizabeth Warren sent a letter to the head of the financial regulatory agency in the U.S., pointing out that 1 in 13 banking and financial executives have committed some kind of corporate fraud, yet they still have jobs. There's no personal responsibility. J.P. Morgan gets fined $13 billion for hosing people out of their houses, but no executive ever spent any time in jail for it. And she said, what are you going to do about it? 1 in 13 should have a criminal record, but doesn't.
Well, again, go back to Obama and go back to his campaign promises to prosecute the thieves on Wall Street. And he brings in a fraud, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, is now back working in that white shoe firm back in Wall Street that protects the criminals. He didn't prosecute one of them. 6 banks convicted of felonies for rigging LIBOR and the interest rates and the forex markets, the currency markets. 6 of them convicted of felonies. Not one person goes to jail. Again, this is what you have in a neo-feudal society, where, again, we talked earlier about the inequality of wealth. There are separate laws in feudal societies for the economic elite and the politically powerful, and that's why you see what's going on.
Gerald, is there anything else besides gold that will be hot in the coming year or the next few years that people should be taking a look at?
Well, again, silver's going along with that, and there'll be a decline in the real estate market. You're already seeing it at the high ends, and but these declines, particularly in the more populous cities, the major cities, whether they're the Beijing or the Shanghais or the Londons or the Vancouvers or the New Yorks, the San Franciscos, they'll have their downs. But on the higher end and the more prosperous areas, they'll rebound. They always have, and they may stay down for a while, but they'll come back. What will be hurt are the fringe areas, and particularly as economies decline and the middle shrinks, those kind of areas will be difficult too. There aren't a lot of opportunities in the financial sector that we see. Among the opportunities, and by the way, we're holding a conference here in July, July 22nd, 23rd. If people want to find out more about it, they can call us at 845-331-3500, 845-331-3500, and it's an on-trendpreneur conference. Not entrepreneur, on-trendpreneur. So we're going to show the opportunities that exist. So if you have a business now and you want to expand it, or you want to know where it's going to go, if you're in a profession looking to start a career, want to expand one, want to change one, that's what this conference is going to be about, putting people on trend so that they can avoid the dangers and seize the opportunities. And also, we're having some special guest speakers here. Max Kaiser and Stacy Herbert from the Kaiser Report will be among our featured speakers. So to answer your question, yes, there will be opportunities, and we'll be talking about some of those at the conference.
Where is that conference?
It's here in Colonial Kingston, New York, and we're 90 miles north of New York City in the beautiful Hudson Valley. This was the third Dutch settlement in the United States, and we hold the conferences at the 1774 Academy. And that's what it was called then, and that's what it's called now. And that's where we hold the conferences. So it's a beautiful area, and we'll have a great... People, by the way, Jim, they're coming from Hong Kong, Italy, France, Chile, Ireland, Switzerland. So they're coming from around the world, and from Calgary. So another thing that people should look at, too, there are two things that... the areas that aren't going to decline and only continue to show growth, and that's clean food and clean water. Abundance of both of them, because both of them are going to be in short supply.
Gerald, I noticed in the Trends Journal you said, eat your medicine, don't take pills. Can you explain?
Well, I have an honorary doctorate in integrative and complementary medicine from the National University of Health Sciences. And so, we try to really concentrate a lot on whole health healing. And when you look, for example, in the United States, the opiate problem that we have, it's because of doctors prescribing these hundreds of millions of pills to people for painkillers. And not only they kill them, they kill the pain, they've killed their brain and turned them into heroin addicts. It's a real plague over here in the United States.
Gerald, it's a real plague in Canada. Proportionately, Canada is the most hooked on opiates nation in the world.
Yeah, and they proportionately, but we're downing 80% of them in this country. So it's the Western doctors that are doing this, because when you look at the reports, this is who's really hooking them first, is when people go in for injuries, and there are reports out there. They're turning them into drug addicts, and it's become a drug-addicted society. So what we're saying, particularly as the baby boomers age, that if you don't want to become an inmate in a nursing home, these are steps and directions to consider. Whole health healing.
Canada is going to be legalizing pot. They'll start working on the legislation next spring. Is that a good move?
I'm totally against the legalization of it because it's a way for the governments to make money. It should be a decriminalization, as I see it, because no one's going to stop people from using it. And it's not going to go away. And I don't think, unless I'm wrong, I don't think Monsanto invented the weed seed. And of course, I'm being facetious. So what right does government have to regulate it? Why don't they mind their own business? The only reason they're making it legal is so they could get tax dollars off it. And then it turns it into a business in a very different way, rather than just taking a natural progression or digression. Again, we had a war on drugs here that's cost trillions of dollars, have millions and millions of innocent people thrown in jail for nothing. And now, of course, they've changed their mind and they're going to legalize it. I was a kid growing up in the Bronx. We used to have guys running the numbers. You play the numbers. It was the last three numbers of what the attendance was at the racetrack at Aqueduct. And I remember the vegetable man used to run the numbers, and they busted him. Oh, this is disgusting. Yeah, it was only a quarter or a dollar that people was spending, but they were taking the money from the poorest people to... Yeah, but then they got into the business called lotto, and it was okay. These politicians disgust me. They should change the word for politicians. They should call them pieces. I am a piece of crap running for office because I'm a megalomaniac and a sociopath, and I really get off on telling other people what to do.
What is the thrill of becoming a politician?
I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate at 23. It's a bunch of people that can't make it anywhere else. The people you couldn't stand in high school and college that wanted to be class president and head of the student council. The brown noses, the suck-ups, the overly ambitious and the insincere. That's who they are. So what makes a murderer a murderer or a crook a crook? It's a sickness. It's a mental disease for most of them. And when you belong to the major parties, the disease is inbred. You're joining the Bloods and the Crips, the murderers and thieves. You know, as I'm watching what was going on up there in Alberta with that terrible forest fire. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong, because of course I'm, a country away, and I'm looking at the numbers of 13 helicopters.
Well, they didn't use the two biggest firefighting aircraft in Canada, the Mars water bomber, which was at one time the world's largest flying aircraft before the jumbo jet was invented. And the same company owns a C-130 Hercules firefighting aircraft. They did not use either one.
But yet, the little creeps love sending troops over to kill other people in foreign countries, don't they? But they can't get enough people out to save the people of their own country. It's like Obama doing a 2-bit gig over there in Flint, Michigan, taking a glass of water and drinking it and telling the kids it's safe and they have nothing to worry about. You don't take care of your own as they kill others. And I'm saying to myself, a country the size of Canada and so few people fighting that thing? And where's the United States? Where is everybody getting together? Where's NATO? Yeah, they love bringing NATO in to go slaughter other people. But boy, when you have a hometown crisis, forget it. Let them rot.
I heard there might be political things behind it. We don't want to name names, but you just have to wonder, because I interviewed the person who owned the Mars water bomber, and he said, I can't see any other reason why you would keep this wondrous thing that can put out 4 acres of fire at a time. And, I heard the Alberta Premier's excuse was there wasn't a suitable water source for it. And I thought, really? The Mars water bomber has a range of 3,000 miles. It couldn't find any water within 3,000 miles?
They're liars, cowards, freaks, and fools. That's who they are.
On a more positive note, do you think Elon Musk's hyperlink has a chance of success where they're going to use...
It would be wonderful if it did. I mean, I don't know the scientific elements of it, but, that's the kind of thing that we need to go into the future. And when you come to the United States, you want to see a rotted infrastructure. It's third world, literally. And, but again, with the United States just sent a ship within 12 miles of a Chinese shoal, an island, a tiny little place that's under dispute. The United States just opened a missile defense system in Europe aimed at Russia. The United States is bringing in NATO, moving troops to the Russian borders. They have them there already. And then you see that Russian planes, circled did barrel rolls over a United States destroyer. Oh yeah, they did. Where was the destroyer? Well, it was, maybe 40 miles off the coast of a Russian naval port. Could you imagine if the Russian fleet was 80 miles off Cape Cod? 40 miles off Cape Cod, the Russian fleet, ships, destroyers, missile cruisers. You think the United States would be sitting on their hands? So what I'm saying is that the penchant for war and the sickness in the mind of the politicians that wage them is what's destroying civilization. And as I read to you a quote from the President of the United States saying, you will enjoy a certain moral purity, but you're not going to get what you want. So, again, for a sociopath like he is, you don't need moral purity to get what you want.
Gerald, if people were interested in getting the Trends Journal, how could they get it?
Trendsresearch.com, trendsresearch.com. And I have to say, you're not going to want to miss this edition of the Trends Journal. It truly is history before it happens. And beyond, of course, we talked about economics and politics, and we have a huge section there on virtual reality, what to expect, the opportunities, the pitfalls, the positives and the negatives, and many, many other areas, including, of course, another new trend, a cashless society, and what it's going to mean and what it's going to cost in a lot of different ways. So to find out more about the Trends Journal, you could go to trendsresearch.com, trendsresearch.com.
Gerald, thank you so much for being back on This Week in Money.
Always great being on with you, Jim. Thank you.
Gerald has been speaking to us from historic Kingston, New York, and he's the publisher of the Trends Journal. That wraps up our show for this week. Thanks to our guests, Ross Clark and Gerald Celente, and thank you for listening. Comments or questions for the show can be emailed to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. We're back next week with more This Week in Money.
This Week in Money is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.